Greetings, everyone. This is Rock's Pocket Show. We're going to learn installment of Mutant Monday. And today, in light of last week's 2099 one-shots, and the ones that are actually coming this week, as well as into next month, we'll be talking about, sadly, one of the groups of characters that are largely being ignored in the story. I'm talking, of course, about 2099 X-Men. Seen here on the variant cover to X-Men number 2 from a week and a half ago. You've got Metalhead there, Bloodhawk, Meanstreak, Skullfire, Cerebra, and Shan, as well. Oh, and Crystalline. Anyway, so X-Men 2099 ran from October of 93, which means probably closer to about July 93, given release dates. For a while, at least back in the 90s, when comics hit comic shops, was usually the month listed on the front would generally be 3 months ahead of the actual month. So a comic released in July would probably say October. And X-Men 2099 number 1 is listed as having been released in October of 93. But it ran from, cover date wise, October 93 to August of 96. And for 35 issues. Which that I think that actually does also account for the one-shots and annuals. So yeah, the concept was revisited in the Time Storm 2009 to 2099 miniseries, as well as in the 2014 Uncanny X-Men Annual, and part of an issue of X-Men Blue also featured the team during a time travel story. There was also a spin-off series entitled X-Nation, or X-Nation 2099. I think the first issue really just kind of says X-Nation, but then like the remaining 5 were all X-Nation 2099 or 2099 AD. Yeah, it lasted for a good long while. Admittedly, from what I understand, it actually it ended with the rest of the 2099 line, so it was probably bad timing. So, who were the X-Men of 2099? Well, first off, you had Shang-Chi San, also known as either Desert Ghost or Controller X. He's the founder of the team. He used to be an outlaw and part of a gang called the Lawless. And briefly over the course of the series, he joined a group called the Theater of Pain. More on them later. His powers, right off the bat, his right hand was covered in green scales and could break things down into the molecular bonds between things that it touched. So he could, oh, door's locked. Well, excuse me. Yeah, there was a door here. However, after an assassination attempt in the first few issues, he developed a secondary mutation where he could heal with his right or with his left hand. Also, the assassination attempt led to him forming a protective regenerative cocoon around himself. And when he came out of that, he had a healing touch as well as a destroying touch. Next up, we've got Timothy Fitzgerald, or Skullfire. He was eventually the team leader. He started off actually kind of as being the POV character, as he had just discovered his power, just kind of had his powers manifest recently, maybe not so much recently, but manifested they had manifested in a deadly manner recently, and he was feeling guilt about it as well as a degree of fear. He actually had quite the character arc over the first few issues, where he started off being timid and afraid of his powers, and basically he went along with things just because, well, he may as well, or because someone said, "Hey, you're coming along, you're coming with us," to, well, becoming, like I said, the team leader. Power wise, he was initially able to absorb and redirect electrical energy. However, as the series progressed, it developed into being able to absorb and redirect any type of energy, including magical energy and ambient energies and whatnot. Also, he actually kind of became an energy being in and of himself, as he was. There actually was a point where he did die and basically just turned into an energy ball, and then just reformed himself into reformed into an energy form that resembled his body. Also, when he's packing a lot of energy to give off, the energy tends to kind of make his skin appear translucent. So, Skullfire. Sadly, I mentioned that they're being pretty much ignored in the New 2099 stuff, which could be because of Doom having the Watcher wiping wiping away the memories of the heroes, but could also be related to. But I don't necessarily think that's the case. Skullfire is referred to as a condition people can be afflicted with, or a drug they can take. I don't remember what. It wasn't entirely clear in the issue. Next up, we've got Shakti Haddad, or Cerebra, co-founder of the team, and in fact, her power to basically sense and or track mutants was instrumental in forming the team itself. She's a skilled martial artist and as well as a brilliant scientist. Born in the privilege, but turned her back on it because just kind of I may have a sort of screwed on that, but it does change the fact that people like me are still oppressed. So, other powers include an ability to manipulate a person's nervous system, which allows her to potentially paralyze, stun someone or knock them out, and also access autonomic functions. Like various other characters in the 2099 universe, she had a small implant that allowed her to connect to computers and the internet from wherever. Next on the lineup list, we've got Henri Huang, or Mean Streak. He was a scientist at Alchemax. He early on served as the team's point man as well as tactician, but he pretty much got relegated to a background role in the title. There wasn't much. There was some little bits of history done for the character, but not a huge amount. How he met Crystalline and the nature of their relationship was brought up. They're lovers. They met in Berkeley before the book started, but during the time that Sean began putting the X-Men together. Power wise, he's got superhuman speed, stamina, reflexes, and thought processes. He's capable of breaking the sound barrier for short periods of time with his speed. Also, as a speedster, he has a high metabolism, which allows him to heal from injuries much faster than most people. Next up, we've got Ruth Kirsten Porter Ogata, or Crystalline. Crystalline was really, really not developed much at all. Um, her parent, her parents were at least briefly talked about, but there wasn't a whole lot. Like she would, like I said, her and Mitri were lovers. What she does is she creates hard crystalline shapes from the minerals in the air, and she would usually in battle use a crystalline staff, or she would also be known to create a wall to block attackers. Next up, we've got Edward von Beethoven Asako, or Metalhead. So he's actually a devout believer in Shannon's version of Xavier's Dream. Before joining the X-Men, he was a syntho-percussionist for a band called the Armageddon Choir. He would eventually, after the Human encountered a group called the Freak Show, he would actually kind of become the link between the two groups. His powers, initially speaking, he could transform from being a human being to a metallic form with increased strength, durability, as well as properties of whatever metal he turned into. So, like if he were to touch a slab of adamantium, oh hey, he's basically made out of adamantium. Same with vibranium, steel, gold, so on and so forth. However, after the team first encountered the Freak Show, and he fought Contagion from the Freak Show, he ended up unable to revert to his human form, and in fact, his metallic form took on a more misshapen quality. His hands, these four fingers basically kind of morphed into being three fingers. His hair was gone. He got bigger and more amorphous looking, I guess. But he could still mimic. He could still, through physical contact, mimic the quality or gain the qualities of various metals. Next up was La Lunatica. So La Lunatica was a former member of the Theater of Pain. A lot of her arc initially was proving to the rest of the X-Men, yeah, she's trying to atone for what she's done. She wants to be a good guy now. When it comes to power, she has superhuman strength, speed, senses, and reflexes, and also she could trigger intense emotions and memories. Next up, we had Lemuel Krug, or Bloodhawk. Bloodhawk was actually more of an ally to the team than a member. He lived in the desert and saw himself as being a protector of the desert. Would actually attack various corporations for doing basically bad things in the desert that he lived in. He worked alongside the X-Men on numerous occasions. Like I said, he was kind of a member, but it was more the guy who would show up to help out. When you call your buddies and say, "Hey, who can help?" Occasionally, he'd show up to help. Now, he did get involved in the first 2099 crossover. Fall. I remember if it was entitled Hammer of Thor, but the basic idea was that Alchemax created a floating city named Valhalla and engineered its own version of the Aesir, as the most popular church in Marvel's 2099 era is, in fact, the Church of Thor. So, Bloodhawk's powers, though, he can transform from being a normal-looking man into a monstrous winged humanoid who has razor-sharp claws and teeth. Also, he has heightened senses as well as immunity to radiation. Next up, we've got Junk Pile. So Junk Pile was a mutant with a techno-organic physiology. He was also a member of the Lawless Gang alongside Shan. Early on in the series, he betrayed the X-Men and would eventually, by the time the 2099 line came to its conclusion, President Victor Von Doom appointed Junk Pile to S.H.I.E.L.D. His powers, while having a techno-organic metabolism, granted him super strength and enhanced durability, he could also basically telekinetically repair his body or alter his size with using nearby pieces of metal. Hence, Junk Pile. Next up, we've got Diamanda LaSalle, or Sham. Sham was a former prisoner of the Theater of Pain who joined the X-Men out of gratitude for rescuing her. She could create audio and visual hallucinations, which actually tend to be fairly convincing. Next up, the first, and I think, the first member of the team to be killed, Kimberly Christine Potters, or Serpentina. Her whole thing was she basically had the Elastigirl thing going on. Elastigirl, Mr. Fantastic, Plastic Man, elongated. Yeah, she could stretch her limbs out or stretch herself out. She was sadly killed off, I want to say, in the third issue. Next up, then we have some enemies and allies. First, biggest name, probably the biggest name here would be Brimstone Love and the Theater of Pain. The Theater of Pain is a group that's devoted to turning pain and suffering into art. The Cenobites would probably absolutely adore them. Brimstone Love is a mutant with a rather demonic appearance. Bat, leathery wings, horns. His power set also works with the whole demon aesthetic. Then there was Master Zhao and the Chosen. So Master Zhao was the final leader of Xavier's X-Men, and by the time 2099 rolled around, he had been taking drugs to enhance his psychic powers, and had gone a bit on the crazy side of things, and ended up making his own versions of the original 5 X-Men, who he called the Chosen. There was One-Eyed Jack, it was Cyclops, there was Psycho K, it was Jean Grey, you get the idea. Then you have, next up were the various members of the Lawless. Basically, Shan's former fellow gang members popped up from time to time as well, usually individually and as a means of setting the story in motion. But some of those included Victor Ten Eagles, Mama Hurricane, and Broken Haiku. In fact, Mama Hurricane turns out was also a part of what was known as the Mutant Underground Railroad. And I think, if I remember correctly, she knew Master Zhao briefly. Next up is Halloween Jack. So Halloween Jack was a friend of Mean Streak, and like Mean Streak, a former Alchemax employee. He ended up turning himself into Alchemax's version of Loki, and caused a bit of chaos. However, unlike the other Alchemax ace here, Jordan Boone, the man who would become Loki and then Halloween Jack, actually kept his primary identity, or his primary personality. Um, Later on, when he showed up next after uh, being turned into Loki, he had taken on the Halloween Jack form after being tortured by the Singe siblings, who were recurring villains as well. Speaking of the Singe siblings, we've got Light and Desdemona Singe, who are the owners of the Singe Casino. They actually tried to frame Shan in the beginning of the series for Lighten's murder of their father, and arranged the assassination attempt. Next up, we've got the Freak Show. So the Freak Show is a group of humans who had been experimented on by the various megacorps. They were fairly nomadic, and they tried to do what good they could wherever they were. Their members included Breakdown, who had similar powers to Shan, mainly just with the right hand. He didn't have the healing touch, just the destructive touch. Then there was Contagion, who infects those he touches with a deadly disease. Contagion is the one who actually caused Metalhead to be stuck in his metallic form. There was Dominic, who can generate and withstand extreme heat. Cyclone, who had either Cyclone spelled Psyclone, but psychic wind blasts. Tantrum, who had a deadly voice that could be magnified by her rage. And finally, you had Rosalinda Navarro Vasquez. Her powers allowed her to disrupt electricity, and she met and eventually fell in love with Metalhead. So there were also some other versions of the 2099 X-Men. Time Storm 2009-2099 from 10 years ago, for example. There was the X-Men popped up in that. This time around, though, they're led by an old one-armed and bald version of Logan. The roster included altered versions of Mean Streak, Crystal, and Bloodhawk, Cerebra, and Junk Pile, and they operated out of a former mutant containment facility in Maryland. And they were trying to rebuild society and defend the area from roving gangs of Hulks. In the 2014 Uncanny X-Men Annual, Tempest encountered a lineup similar to the original 2099 X-Men lineup. One major difference to this version of the timeline was that Magic, Colossus' sister, Ileana Rasputin, was by 2099 the Sorcerer Supreme. They would, like I said, they also encountered the X-Men Blue squad. Also encountered them during the X-Men Blue run, the time displaced original 5 X-Men. And sadly, like I mentioned earlier, they are seemingly absent from the current 2099 story and its tie-ins in Amazing Spider-Man. I'd love to see the 2099 X-Men come back, especially even if it was just kind of like a quick thing. And like I mentioned a while back that I would love to see an exploration of some of a bullet points-ish exploration of Moira's sixth lifetime. And with as far along as that goes, during that you could actually incorporate the characters from X-Men 2099 and have Moira have run into them as well. Hell, she could even have initially, you could set up, oh yeah, she, prodded along Shan to, form an X-Men team of his own, and so on and so forth. But we'll see what happens in the future with them. they have gotten, at least some love outside of comics. Back in the '90s, during the Toy Biz Marvel action figure heyday, there was a line of X-Men 2099 figures. It included Brimstone Love, La Lunatica, and a few of most of the X-Men themselves. Um, Mean Streak and Junk Pile got figures done in the WizKids 2099 collector's set. But yeah, sadly, they don't get as much love as personally I feel they deserve. But that's me. Anyway, that's it for now. Just a heads up, this week we're going to be a bit on the busy side, so there won't be too terribly many videos. There will be a Building the Team video tomorrow, and possibly also something on Sunday. But that's it for now. As always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified when I put up new content. Links to my Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, and PayPal can be found in the description box down below. This is Rock and Roll Spock signing off, saying live long and rock hard.